So in this video, we are going to learn and understand logic, both the traditional versus the modern perspectives for specifically first year BA LLB students. Let's look at the traditional definition of logic. Traditionally, logic is understood as the study of correct reasoning. Traditional logic, study of correct reasoning, tracing its roots to ancient philosophy, particularly with Aristotle. Aristotle is often called the father of logic because he developed a structured approach to reasoning, step-by-step approach to reasoning, known as syllogistic logic. This form of logic relies on the structure of arguments, where a conclusion is drawn from a set of premises, assuming they are true. So what is a traditional definition of logic? So we'll try to understand this again. So traditionally, that is in the olden times, logic was understood as the study of correct reasoning. Basically, this we can trace its roots back to Aristotle. Aristotle was also known as father of logic because he developed a structured approach to reasoning. So this reasoning we have to understand again. What is reasoning? Logically, step by step, coming to a conclusion is known as reasoning. And that old traditional way of uh, developing a structured approach to reasoning was known as syllogistic logic. This form of logic relies on the structure of arguments, where a conclusion is drawn from a set of premises, assuming these premises or statements are true. So most important of this is that traditional logic is the study of correct reasoning. That is one. The traditional definition of logic was also known as was based on syllogistic logic, and this logic, traditional logic, was developed based on a structured approach to reasoning. So basically it relies on the structure of the arguments, and where a conclusion is drawn from a set of premises, assuming they are true. So what are the core principles? So traditional logic emphasizes on validity and soundness. So two important parts or components of traditional logic is validity and soundness. So what is validity? An argument is valid if its conclusion, so an argument is valid if its conclusion logically follows from its premises. That is, whatever the premises may be, premises number 1 plus premises number 2, that is statement number 1, statement number 2 should logically come to a valid conclusion. So P1 plus P2 should lead to the C is equal to C, which is the conclusion. So an argument, so these are the set of arguments or statements or premises P1 and P2 which logically leads us to a conclusion which is valid. So this whole argument is valid only if its premises logically takes us to a conclusion. So soundness. So let's understand the second principle of traditional logic, soundness. An argument is sound if it is valid, and that is, the argument has to be valid first of all, and its premises are actually true. So the premises also have to be true, these have to be true, and the argument should be sound and valid. So example, in legal reasoning, imagine a legal rule. Major premise states, that is, a legal rule states all individuals who commit theft are punishable. So if a defendant these are known as minor premises or minor statements. So if a defendant has committed theft, the logical conclusion is that the defendant should be punished. So here, with this example, we can understand that the argument has to be sound. The argument is, first of all, the rule was that all individuals who commit theft are punishable. So the argument was that if a defendant has committed a theft, then the logical conclusion, which will lead us to a logical conclusion that the defendant should be punished. So it is very important, this part. This reasoning follows the classic syllogistic form. If A and B, then C. That is, if A and B are true, then it will lead to C, which is foundational in legal argumentation. So this is very much foundational. And this is known as deductive reasoning, where a general rule is applied to specific situation. So we will look at the core principles, or how traditional logic or features of traditional logic is based upon two things. One is the validity of the argument and the soundness of the argument. So what is valid? So validity means that argument has to be valid, and the conclusion of that argument should logically follow from its premises, and it has to be sound. So an argument has to be sound. Sound means valid, which can be understood, which can be verified. So when an argument can be verified, it will be valid. When the argument is true, it is valid. So an argument is sound if it is valid. Generally, arguments are either valid or invalid. So only when an argument is sound, if it is valid and its premises are actually true. So both, for soundness to happen, both has to be there. The premises have to be true and the argument has to be finally valid. So there was an example of a legal rule where that legal rule stated that all individuals who commit theft are punishable, and then there was a premise that if a defendant the all individuals who commit theft are punishable is the premise, and if the defendant has committed theft is the logical conclusion. Let's recap. All individuals who commit theft are punishable is a major premise, and there is a minor premise also in this, which is that if a defendant has committed theft, the conclusion will be that the defendant should be punished. And this reasoning follows the classic syllogistic form. If A and B, then that will be equal to C, which is foundational in legal argumentation. Second, let's understand modern definition of logic. Modern logic, evolving significantly in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, expanded beyond classical syllogistic structure. Key figures like Gottlob Frege and later Bertrand Russell introduced symbolic logic, which uses mathematical symbols and operations to represent logical relations. So modern definition of logic is dependent on symbolic logic, is based on symbolic logic, and it significantly evolved in the 19th and the 20th century. Modern logic is used in maths through mathematical symbols and operations to represent logical relations more precisely. This shift enabled logic to handle more complex arguments, paradoxes, and conditional statements, leading to areas such as propositional logic and predicate logic. propositional logic, and predicate logic. So what are the core features of modern logic? So there are two of them. One is symbolic representation. The second is truth functional analysis. Alright, so let's understand the first core principle of modern logic, which is symbolic representation. Representing arguments with symbols to clarify complex relations. So the modern logic uses symbols to represent arguments. Truth functional analysis, breaking down statements to analyze truth values, which helps in understanding more complex logical structures and conditional statements. So in modern logic, statements are broken down to analyze their truth value. So complex statements are broken down into simple and simpler statements to analyze their truth value, whether they are true or false, which will help in understanding more complex logical structures and conditional statements. This is very important. So example, in legal reasoning, in legal context, modern logic helps analyze more intricate arguments, especially where multiple conditions apply. For instance, in a contract case, you might have an argument like, if party A fulfills condition X and party B fulfills condition Y, then the contract is valid. Modern logic allows lawyers to map out such conditions clearly, assess each variable, and determine the outcome systematically. So the key thinkers, third part, key thinkers associated with these views. Traditional logic, Aristotle was associated with traditional logic. He is also known as father of logic, and is Organon, where he established foundational logical theories. Modern logic is associated with Gottlob Frege and Bertrand Russell, where pivotal who were pivotal in developing symbolic and predicate logic. Symbolic and predicate logic. So what is a predicate logic? Symbolic logic, we already know that logic which is based on symbols and mathematical operations, or symbols and operations utilized in computer science and maths. So, and predicate logic we'll understand later what it means, which formed the basis for much of today's logical analysis. Why this matters in law. Understanding both traditional and modern logic is valuable for legal reasoning. Traditional logic helps in structuring clear deductive arguments, example statutes and case law applications, while modern logic allows for handling complex and conditional legal scenarios, example contracts, regulations. Both approaches gave law students tools for crafting rigorous structured arguments and understanding the reasoning behind legal judgments.